I want to welcome Agile XRM to the podcast. I've known the people at Agile XRM for the past 12 years. I've seen how their business process management tool can add massive value to complex organizational processes in sectors such as finance and government. If you have complex processes or a need for dialogues on the Power Platform or Dynamics 365, take a look at how this BPM tool can add value. You can find them at agilexrm.com or check out the show notes for more details. Welcome to the MVP Show. My intention is that you listen to the stories of these MVP guests and are inspired to become an MVP and bring value to the world through your skills. If you have not checked it out already, I do a YouTube series called How to Become an MVP. The link is in the show notes. With that, let's get on with the show. Today's guest is from Washington, D.C. in the U.S. She was first awarded her MVP in 2021. She's passionate about educating, empowering, and supporting women and minorities in tech. She enjoys running, baking, yum, and hiking in her free time. You can find full links to her bio, all the kind of stuff she's done in the webosphere, in the show notes for this episode. Azure, welcome to the show.
Hi there. How are you doing, Mark?
Good. Now, do you know... And it just came to me there because I know heaps of people probably say to you, hey, with a name like Azure, is Microsoft paying you royalties, etc. Being that I think you had the name before they had the product. And so with that in mind, did you know that there's a rock that's part of the Mediterranean it was called Azure. It was an arch and actually it fell into the sea. I only found that when I went there and I was like, wow, Microsoft still, there was an ancient landmark that had that name. Are you aware of that?
Are you talking about Azure, right? Is that the one?
Azure, yeah.
Somebody actually threw that in a group chat the other day. A friend who is into rocks and whatnot. And he's like, have you seen this? And I was like, I really like this a lot. I don't think I've ever I hadn't seen it before then, but now I know next pieces of jewelry that I get, I think are going to be that. My favorite color is blue, by the way. I don't know if that's that's a cop out.
This is actually a rock, a massive outcrop on an island that was called Azure.
Oh,
rather than And I was just trying to look it up, and I'm like, it's not as easy to jump to at my fingertips. So I might come back to you on that. But anyhow, tell me about food, family, and fun. What do they mean to you? What do you do when you're not doing anything Power Platform related?
Oh, food, family, and fun. One, food is why I exist. I love to cook. I love to eat. In fact, I've already planned out some of my meals for the next couple of days. Tomorrow night's dinner is going to be a jerk chicken with rice and peas. I'm half Jamaican, so I've been craving something from mom's kitchen. So I'm going to make some jerk chicken tomorrow, rice and peas, a mango cabbage slaw, and maybe some fried plantains. So I think that's gonna be it for the next couple of days. Yeah. Family is super important to me. I have a close relationship with my family, but I also feel family of choice is also incredibly important, right? If your family of origin doesn't quite do it for you, I understand that not everybody has a good relationship or a close relationship, or perhaps, family has passed away. Friends, community, same thing to me. Huge support system. I call my friends my family too. And these days, I had been traveling for a bit from August to mid last month, and got to catch up with a few friends, which was absolutely wonderful. And then for the folks who were here at home, I'm getting back to seeing them as well. So there's been a couple of babies born. I'm enjoying auntie life and supporting friends in that new chapter of their journey, which has been really nice. So tomorrow I'll get to help a friend. Her husband has to go travel a little bit further for work tomorrow. So I'm going to go walk their dog for them. And then just be like, what do you need me to do? Fold laundry, do dishes, whatever it is. I'm there to help.
Awesome. I love it. It's so grounding. Tell me, how did you get into technology?
Ooh, good question. I feel like it's kind of maybe like a bit of a piecemeal thing. So I never thought I would go into tech per se. Like my degree is in biochemistry, and I ended up in the pharmaceutical industry. Had wanted to go to med school at the time. My mom was really sick at the time. I was taking my medical entrance exams. Decided somebody's got to pay student loans, so I turned to pharmaceuticals. But when I was younger, I worked in a computational chemistry lab at a university. I interned. I really loved chemistry. And this lab was like using Linux to analyze like ring structures, molecular ring structures for chemotherapy targets. And so this software that we're using would tell you like the distance between like ring structures, bond energies, bond lengths. If you change them around, what happens to them, which I thought was really cool. I don't think I ever really saw what I could do with it in the future, to be honest. Um, and then I discovered Power Platform after working, for years in the pharmaceutical industry. I think I'd been there about 9 years. This was back at the end of 2019. So this was about 3 years ago. 3 years ago, and kind of fell head over heels for Power Automate, and that's kind of how I got into tech. So taught previous company I worked for GSK, taught their first Power Platform bootcamp, or at least the Power Automate section of it. Got invited to do that. Got introduced to the community a couple months later. Started doing some conferences, and quite frankly, I didn't, even though I was teaching other people, Power Automate, Power Apps, to get into tech, and they were getting jobs. I actually didn't feel confident enough to step into the tech world for whatever reason, call it imposter syndrome, maybe. But I had gotten a data analyst job that was really strictly Power Platform at GSK at transition roles. And then earlier this year made a fall into consulting. So that's the shorthand story.
That is awesome. When you say you in your involvement in Power and you mentioned their Power Automate, is that your flagship technology that you are the guru on, or is it any of the other Power suite?
I do Power Automate. That's really where I would say I specialize in. I do Canvas apps as well, a little bit of model driven. I've been getting into RPA over the past several months. Power BI I've built like a dashboard or two, but not quite my wheelhouse at the moment. But yeah, Power Automate I love it a lot. I didn't know about the rest of the Power Platform, to be honest, when I was introduced to Power Automate, and just kind of like moved with that, and then discovered the other bits and pieces of it, and now it's a whole thing. There's always something to learn, which is what I really love about. What I really love about the platform. So it keeps me engaged, and I love working with it.
I love it. What do you have? And I always ask people that are involved in Power Automate, do you have, so it's two questions. One question is, do you have any automations that you've created for your personal life?
Oh, yeah.
And then do you have any automations that you have done for your professional life, but they're more for you? It's around you personal productivity, rather than the automation where you're automating a business or organizational process.
Sure. Yeah. So a challenge for me when I was learning RPA was what's a good use case? Because you can get RPA at home, like if you have a Windows 10 or Windows 11 machine. And so my task was, what can I do with it? And I made a desktop flow that I can upload COVID test reimbursement receipts. So here in the States, if you buy like a over the counter COVID test, you can get reimbursed by an insurance company. And so I made a flow that I can just snap a photo of a receipt up into OneDrive and press a button, and it'll upload it to the insurance website for me, and then I just wait for the reimbursement in the mail. So that was a fun one for me to do.
That's good. That's practical. It's very smart.
Yeah. A buddy of mine, Ashwar Prakash, he just put out something with Power Apps and Raspberry Pi to control lights, and he's doing a whole series on YouTube right now. I think that's going to be like my next venture, to be like, I want to control I have a dumb house instead of a smart house. So I want to learn how to do some things to power my home. And then let me see, for work, I had things like to remind me to submit expense reports, timesheets. Most recently, I'd come back, or I was on a business trip, and I had all of these receipts, right? I was overseas. I'm notorious for losing receipts, or they get so folded up in your wallet or whatever, they kind of fade. So I just created a really quick Power app to snap a photo of the receipt to house everything and just uploaded it to SharePoint. And then I was going to use Power Automate to put it just into like an Excel spreadsheet and then upload it to Dynamics and use it that way. So for me, that was a lot better than having to manually key in things on two different ends, or have to keep track of a receipt, like, carry like an envelope and just stick all your receipts in there and then hope you don't lose them over the course of 2 weeks.
What's the craziest or the most empowered, that you've seen Power Automate used, that it really created a massive amount of impact to people inside an organization, where you were just like, mate, this is like next level about employee productivity, or streamlining a process that might have been inherently bogged down with data being copied between systems, things like that? Anything jump to mind?
So many. I have to be honest. Like, that's what I love about this platform is that it can do so much. In a personal experience, we had a safety team at a previous organization that I worked at that was 5 months behind in their safety investigations. Attrition, right? Running multiple pharmaceutical plants at the same time. It was kind of hard to juggle everything. So they just had a SharePoint list where people were entering in information. And then beyond that, it was one SharePoint 2010 workflow that would send an email just to notify managers that something had happened. And then in the behind the scenes, it was the safety team was creating documentation for, the affected employee to fill out, trying to get approval from their manager, potentially from their director, all this data gathering. They'd have to do all of this just by hand. They didn't have a status list of anything. Everything was just like this very manual process, maybe a whiteboard, a couple of sticky notes. And I was able to automate like the entire thing for them. So the only time that they got involved was when the person had filled out their paperwork. And there was a confirmation, right? Because we just use like approvals and Power Automate. That's when they stepped in and said, okay, we can start, our investigation. But upstream to that, they didn't need to worry about if an incident had happened, right? Because there's paperwork that needed to happen within 24 hours. Now, if it was like a critical incident, of course, they'd get involved ASAP. But if it was some of these minor incidents, like a potential accident, we would just wait until, like they received the filled out paperwork and the button, was the indicator, like, okay, for the person on the side that was filling it out, like, it's done. And then it would update a SharePoint list for them and then send, Teams message out to the safety team to be like, okay, so-and-so's filled out their paperwork. Go ahead and, proceed. One that I saw at Power Platform Conference in September, which I thought was like an amazing use case, was somebody automated a like virtual machine creation for their site. And so what was they could customize what kind of machine that they needed, could figure out like what the costs were going to be associated with it, all using adaptive cards and teams, which I thought was an incredible use case. Yeah. And people would normally have to call like IT in order to make this happen, wait for some calculations to be done, right? So people in the back end were also doing it. And then it just eliminated really like at least half of a work stream for IT that they didn't need to get involved until this machine needed to kind of be built. So many great use cases. I've seen marketing campaigns powered out of Power Automate, things that were manual tracking in Excel that no longer have to be done in Excel. There's so many great use cases, things that I've never even thought of because it's just not something that I've needed to do. So I love that it's so expansive that people can just make it their own for whatever business use case that it is. I've seen people powering their Teslas using Power Apps. Just people get really, really creative with the platform. Yeah. Ooh, okay. Back in 2020, I did my first 2 virtual conferences because yay, pandemic. And when I had done those, I had some folks reaching out to me on Twitter asking if I'd been nominated. And I hadn't, and I didn't know what MVP was, to be honest. And the one thing folks kept telling me was, you're missing this community piece. You're missing this community piece. And community by way of YouTube or blog, that was like what folks were telling me that I needed. And at the time, a blog, well, let's be honest, I bought a domain. I haven't done anything with it. But at the time, that was a little too much effort for me, if I was to be honest, because my job, I was working 12 plus hours a day, was already teaching, a boot camp at, a previous employer, had come up with like the curriculum for that. And so it just felt like, oh, if all this is to do a blog or a YouTube channel, I don't know if this is for me. So I just kind of kept doing my thing. I was teaching a boot camp, posting some work on Twitter, doing some demos. I was teaching for, and still am, for Power Platform School, which is an upskilling school for like Black folks between the UK and the US, or, Black or of African descent, and was teaching there as well, kind of just being a busybody and not really thinking about MVP as a thing. And one day a friend reached out, goes, "Hey, what's your email?" I was like, "Oh, I gave him my email." And next thing I know, I get, "Hey, you've been nominated for MVP." I was like, wait a minute. I didn't think that I was qualified for it because I didn't have, YouTube, blog. And this friend, John Lebeck, who used to work for Microsoft, he was like, "Hey, it's not just about having that kind of visibility." He's like, "It's about building community. And if, the people who talk to you know that's very strongly what you like to do, it doesn't necessarily have to be like out in the open." So that was kind of an eye opener for me, to be honest, because I think in my mind, from what some folks had told me, it was, I had to be like out there, visible all the time, creating content. And just at that point in time, I didn't have enough time for it. Or I was creating content, but it was more internal, for people at work. I was helping to run like the internal community, and this was separate from my job. This was just because I loved it. So then the notification system broke. So I never actually got an email that I think I got nominated like last February. And every month I'd see the tweets come out and people were like, "Hey, I got, I won MVP." And I was like, well, I guess I just didn't get it at all. And somebody else was like, "Wait, again? Like, it's been 7 months at this point. Why haven't you gotten it?" I was like, "I don't know." So they resubmitted me and they're like, "So you've already been submitted. It says your application is still pending, but that doesn't make any sense. Like, it shouldn't take this long." And then it turns out like the notification system was broken. And I got an email from Microsoft that's like, "Sorry, it's been broken. You'll hear something soon." And then, I was awarded in December of last year, which was really exciting. It was like the icing on the cake for all of the stuff that you already do. Like, MVP wasn't on my bucket list, I would say. It wasn't something I was gunning for, but to know that my efforts in the community are not going unnoticed, or, that they're valuable. It's a really sweet gesture to be awarded MVP. So, yeah.
So you've been an MVP for about a year now. What impact has it had for you personally?
Oh my gosh, there's a lot. I fell into like a new career. So, like, I'm officially in tech. I'm in transition right now, but it afforded me the opportunity to like walk into, an interview and people are like, "We already know who you are." I was like, "Oh, that's strange. Never had that before." It's not like that in pharma. A lot more, I would say, just like people want to learn from you, opportunities. And I think it's neat to be able to just coach people, if they need help on a flow, or I've got some mentees at this point, older and younger than me, who are looking to get into tech or looking to make a transition. In a way, it's like it's changed a lot, and then also nothing at all in a sense, because I'm still doing the same things that I was before. Just get that little bit of a distinction next to it. So it's kind of been a wild couple of years. I'm not going to lie. I just never imagined any of this. And it's really like Power Platform in general has changed the trajectory of my life. Very grateful to be here.
That's so cool. Last question. What's on your radar for the next 12 months?
Ooh. Rest. Good question. I'll be teaching Power Platform School in the spring with a new cohort. There are a couple of events that I'm planning to submit some sessions for. So maybe European Power Platform Conference. At the moment, I've been taking some time to help some of my more junior folks in Power Platform and encouraging them to apply to conferences. So trying to help them get, a bit of a stage, a bit of a platform as well. What else? Let's see. Might be organizing some community events. And one thing I did want to do this year that I didn't get to was I have a curriculum already drafted for Power Automate. It's just not gotten out anywhere. So hopefully in the next year, that'll be something that I can throw out on GitHub or YouTube. What I love about this community very much is that there are a lot of free resources, right? For me, I don't think I've never taken a paid class or a workshop. Everything has been available to me at no cost whatsoever. And I absolutely want to keep that going. So any beginner intermediate space is kind of where I like to stick in terms of teaching things. And hopefully I can get that out in the next year somewhere. And that might be of benefit. Maybe do some live workshops too. So we'll see.
Hey, thanks for listening. I'm your host, Business Application MVP Mark Smith, otherwise known as the NZ365 Guy. If you like the show and want to be a supporter, check out buymeacoffee.com/NZ365 Guy. Thanks again, and see you next time.